Peace and blessings. Welcome to IGhtSoBloom, a place where healing isn't linear and emotional intelligence takes center stage. They say if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. Got my squad with me, Mr. Chris Classic, Mr. Jamel Shelton, and Dr. Curtis Jasper.
Yes, sir.
We're here to let you know that no matter what storm you're currently going through, there's always room to grow. IGhtSoBloom. And today, we have our special guest, Mr. Glenn Wilson. How you doing, sir?
Doing good, bro.
Outstanding. For those who don't know, Mr. Glenn Wilson is a 30-year entrepreneur. He has 30 years in the men's grooming business out here in Atlanta. Also, Icy Shop.
Miss
Icy's, and my favorite spot in the city, Apartment 4B. Right. You know, we all ate there on Friday, and everything from the service to the food was always immaculate.
Absolutely.
So, thank you for that. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Today's topic is forgiveness, gentlemen.
Ooh.
So we're going to get in our bag a little bit.
Let's do it.
You got to pick that topic. What made you pick that topic, sir?
What made me pick that topic?
Who you got to forgive that you wanted to talk about that? Or who been begging?
Man, I probably need to forgive myself mostly. But then I think, you know, it spans from parents to friends to relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Which do you feel would be the hardest to forgive?
The hardest, I would say, would be myself. I think that would probably be my, I'm just hard on myself, you know, and it's because I deal with the struggle of knowing better, right? Knowing better and knowing what I should be doing, and versus what I'm actually doing.
And is that due to habit? Is that do you think you were like conditioned to do it that way? Sometimes it's lazy, like I know I should go to the gym, but fuck that.
I think it's a level of weakness, you know, some sort of weaknesses where, you know, just mental weakness, you know, just not necessarily being able to like have that fortitude and discipline to stay the course in certain instances.
Sounds like you are pretty hard on yourself. He said weakness. Damn, I don't like you talking to yourself like that, man.
No.
It's
but
just true.
The lack of forgiveness or the lack of the ability to forgive. I feel like we're not taught how to forgive.
Indeed.
Right? Like, who teaches you how to forgive yourself? Like, that's not something that we typically see our parents model. You know what I'm saying? So the idea is always, you know, typically when you, as a man, when you grow up, it's about being a provider and, you know, doing for other people, right? Doing for your partner. But a lot of times we skip that part about how to forgive ourselves, especially if we don't find forgiveness in the people that are closest to us.
I think it also takes practice, right? You can't come off the rip and just forget. Going back to your point, Chris, if we haven't been taught something and it's the first time us doing something, like anything else in life, you have to consistently practice the art of forgiving yourself or anyone else for that standpoint. But I think if we don't do so, what tends to happen is resentment sets in. And I think that's the thing that I'm most scared of, resenting myself or someone else because I did not do my part in forgiving them for whatever actions or inactions they did at the
So let
moment.
me ask you, gentlemen, how has how you were raised as a child and your understanding of forgiveness then instructed how you forgive as an adult?
I'll jump in if I may.
Please.
So I think as children, for me specifically, I wasn't directly taught about forgiveness, but I was shown elements of forgiveness. I was apologized to, right? There was a processing, right? I was encouraged not to be hard on myself, but to hold myself accountable. So I had glimpses of what turned into forgiveness for me. But especially like, you know, my mother apologized when she made errors. Right, and
that's big.
That's
essentially, that's the basis of it, right? And we were able to reconcile. So I learned how to accept and give apologies as the first step in the forgiveness stage.
I think it's cool that you learned that inside of your home. Inside of my home, we didn't really operate within forgiveness. I lived in a home where it's like, you do what I say to do, and if I made a mistake, it is what it is, right?
Right.
You get over it. And so they might come back with like, I got you some McDonald's, right? To kind of show that active, but it was never of, I'm sorry, right? And I think for me, that kind of set a tone early in my life where it's like, internally I may want to forgive, but it's like, damn, I'm being vulnerable if I say that I did something wrong, right? And it wasn't until I got older that I really recognized that vulnerability and opening up to talk about things that I could have done better. And now inside of our home, I apologize often inside of my family, whether it's my wife or my kids. And I think for me, it sets a tone that it's okay to not be perfect. Actually, as humans, we're not designed to be perfect. For sure.
I think that fear of not being accepted or not accepting an apology oftentimes prevents people from taking that step. Like, what if you apologize and they don't forgive you?
Yeah, I would say that there has to be some sort of communication model in the dynamic for forgiveness to happen, because you first have to be able to hear what the offense was, right? Like, you know, if the person can't communicate with you because you blow up all the time, they're never going to express how you
Guilty.
offended them. You understand what I'm saying? So then if they can't tell you, you can't forgive yourself because you don't know how you offended them. But then, you know, they'll never forgive you because they haven't even got to tell you what the offense is. You know what I'm saying? So I think one of the first steps to forgiveness is first being able to hear what needs forgiveness in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, but I've interacted with individuals who, at one point, their ears were open to hear forgiveness, but the behavior didn't line up, and unfortunately, they turned off the words at that point, right? I'm referencing my previous marriage, right? I was like, "Hey, I'm sorry. How can I make it better?" And she was like, "I don't hear you. I don't believe you." But her history was, her mom would say, you know, "Please forgive me," and then still do or not do the very thing that they were working on.
So are you saying that if a person does not have a history of seeing forgiveness actually work, it's going to be hard for them to forgive?
And that's my experience.
Okay,
right?
gotcha.
Just the disalignment or the unalignment of words matching the actions. People are like, okay, I hear you. And we've all been through it, right? We think that the person is still not accepting, right? She's still mad. No, she ain't heard you. Yeah. And if she did, she don't trust your words, right? And so that's work on their part, right? And that's just giving space on our part.
And what did that do for you, right? You know, you're offering forgiveness to your ex, and she essentially didn't hear you. How did that make you feel, the fact that you were vulnerable enough to express what you did wrong, and those words weren't heard?
Right. So I just had to be more mindful and do double work. I had to do my work and hold space for hers. So I still had to do my work. I'm programmed to assign the words to it. Hey, my bad, I dropped the ball. And I also had to say, well, let me follow up with some immediate behaviors, because I got to speak to her listening and show her body. But I didn't stop doing my way. I knew my way. And keep in mind, forgiveness don't mean that we got to be vulnerable or we did something wrong. Sometimes it's just a miss, right? Like we assign forgiveness to dropping the ball. That ain't it. Yeah. You could have bought her the wrong gift she didn't like, right? You could have went out and did You could have closed on a big deal and didn't, include her. Like there's levels to forgiveness. It doesn't always mean that we dropped the ball.
Gee, just so you know, Jamel's how did that make you feel, brother? Yeah. He's going to say that he's going to go deeper. So I wanted to get your opinion. How did your experience as a child instruct your forgiveness as an adult?
Great question.
Because I know you where you from again?
I'm
Brooklyn?
from Brooklyn.
So you talk that talk. Where you from?
I'm from Brooklyn, man.
Here we go with that New York.
Where's that at? Where is that?
That just set a different level of comfort, actually, right?
Yes, sir.
But my experience as a child affected how I forgive as an adult. I would say I'm still struggling with forgiveness, actually. It's just to be fully transparent. I grew up in a home where my mom, she struggled with addiction. My dad wasn't around. And my mom was a tyrant. She ruled with an iron fist. It was like you were saying, Jamel, like, do what I say do. There ain't no back talk, right? And so I think and she was very abusive as well. Like she was emotionally, physically abusive, and she, you know, so she didn't necessarily exemplify what it is to be, you know, to be forgiven. Like she didn't. I don't even understand what that was. I'm still working through it, but that I was.
So there were no apologies.
It was. No, I mean, on her deathbed, she apologized to me, and I think that's why I was able to move on. So back in 2014.
First off, my condolences.
Thank you. You know, in 2014, she was transitioning, and we sat and talked and just build. Like she took me back to her childhood and how she, you know, was angry with her parents for passing away at an early age. And so, you know, I think I was able to see the correlation between how she came up and how she raised me and my siblings. And I think that was where I was able to start to forgive, and because I understood a little bit better as a parent, right? Having my own child, having, you know, to ask him for his forgiveness for some of the things that I did or didn't do.
How old is he?
Well, my son is 29. He'll be 30 in a week or two.
So I'm just trying to gauge, like,
My oldest.
where would you say you were at in your emotional journey when you were raising him? Like, do you feel like you had the emotional intelligence to apologize if you overplayed your hand?
Intellectually, I did. Like, you know, I think I'm intelligent enough to understand things theoretically, but I think that emotionally and like it was still a disconnect, I believe. So I would say the words like everybody is saying, but I think there was still a level of just not matching my actions with, you know, like I didn't change the behaviors.
Yeah.
At your age now, Glenn, do you see forgiveness as a sense of strength or a sense of vulnerability?
And how does that make you feel?
Come on, man.
I think
You hit it before I...
you know, so we getting into it. So I think it's both. I think it's a sense of strength and vulnerability. I think that forgiveness is really for you,
Indeed.
more so than it is for the person. And I think that, you know, if we're all children of God, right, and we asking of anything or anyone to be forgiving of us and the things that we do on a daily basis, then we have to exemplify that as well. So I think the vulnerability piece is that people are human. You know, at the most basic level, we're human.
That's good.
You know, and we're gonna mess up. We're gonna make mistakes. You know, and you know, we have to hold space for mistakes. We have to give grace to people who mess up, you know, and understand that sometimes it's just that moment in time and it doesn't define all of your existence or all of what that relationship was.
Are you still able to do that same thing with inside of all of the business? I mean, you run multiple businesses, right? And I know as a business owner, oftentimes you got to forgive your employees for a lot of things. So how does your personal relationship with forgiveness?
Look at Glenn. He like, you sure you want to go here?
But how does your personal relationship with forgiveness get entered into your professional space?
It don't, man. We fire them people, man.
be
You
clear.
stole something, you are out of here.
Yeah.
We're not, I mean, I could forgive you in the spirit. I could forgive you because I understand what that looks like when you know, so we trust. So like, just for example, we have restaurants, right? And we buy food and we're not there monitoring all of the inventory, every aspect of the day, right? So there are times when we look at our surveillance system and we see, you know, theft happening, right? You look at your inventory, there's a lot of red snappers gone, right? Like, where'd they go? We didn't sell them all. And you start rolling the tape and you have your prep team loading up their bags, taking them home. And so on a human level, I understand hunger, right? I've been hungry before.
Yeah.
And so I understand having children and not being able to provide for them. And so first law of nature, self-preservation. You're going to do whatever you can to preserve, or not preserve, but yeah, preserve yourself and your family. And so, you know, but on the flip, there's theft. Like, you're impacting my bottom line because all of that matters.
Yeah.
And so I could forgive that, right, on a human level, but
Like, we don't got beef, but however,
business-
you burnt that bridge.
yeah,
We don't
because
have
I got a
snap.
family to take care of too. you know, and I invested into this to be able to better myself financially, and you're impeding that.
I want to take what Jamel asked and raise it up one. All right, that's for employees. Have you had conflict with your business partners before that you've had to forgive?
That you
'Cause
can't- you can't
I
fire
personally
them.
don't think of any business that hasn't had conflict with their business partners.
Man. So I want to be, you know, this is going to air, right? Like,
Yeah, that's right. This is
So-
being broadcasted.
All right. I love this, first of all. I like to talk, man. And I like to speak my truth. So, but I also am mindful of, you know, my relationships.
Yeah.
And so,
Let's call him Brother X.
Nah, we don't
Well,
even got
it's
to
not
name
even so
names.
much
Just-
that.
It could be a scenario.
I'm gonna find a way to speak the truth without necessarily, and truth is truth. But yes, I believe that we you know, as people, like I said in a second ago, so we tend to be more focused on ourselves a lot of the time. Like, we're selfish people. You know, it takes a lot to put someone or a collective before your own ambitions. And I think that even in like groups, you know, there are groups that are formed, and, you know, when, like Jay-Z said, you know, it's easy when everybody is broke, right? When no one has anything. But then once we all get some paper, you'll see, you know, how people truly feel about you. Mm-hmm. And I found that to be true. You know, like when we on the bottom, it's like, yeah, everybody is brotherly kumbaya. It's like, yeah, let's get it. But then as soon as we get that thing that we was fighting for, then you notice the shifts in people's energy. And then it don't take long before people actually move themselves out of the space.
Right.
And then there's no sense of respect for what we built, right? Mm-hmm. So full transparency, we literally just closed down. And everybody, and let me preface this by saying that everybody has a perspective, right? My perspective is not necessarily the only one, and it's not necessarily true. It's just the way I see it.
Right.
And so, you know, we ended up closing Miss Icy's down. Actually, I turned the keys in tomorrow. Right. And I think, and that was our first venture together, right? As a collective, as a group. It was 7 of us, you know, everybody with, you know, just different role and responsibilities. But I think that showed us each other. It was like a mirror that we all put up in front of ourselves, and we saw each other. And then we moved on to apartment 4B, and that was a different dynamic, but it was still a level of togetherness, but then it shifted. And so now it's like everybody is kind of like just trying to figure out their own thing, you know, because we never was able to come back and say, okay, you know what, I'm taking accountability for this part. You know, I might have messed up. I forgive you. You know, do you forgive me? You know, we never came back as a collective to.
You touched on something that really hit when you said they disrespected what we built together. Or
no, not necessarily disrespect. It just was no respect.
No respect.
So it's a slight difference in that.
Okay, I agree. It's hard not to take that personal. I know for me personally, I have gone into business, had somebody I felt not show respect, and taken it personally, and I haven't been able to find that forgiveness for them yet.
Were you able to talk to them? Did you actually have that conversation, or has it been Mario inside of his head?
Yes, no, I did speak with that person, and it was a group phone call, and I think whenever there's other ears and eyes, ego takes center stage, and not the purpose, and not the humility that it would be on a one-on-one conversation.
Well, were you Wario or Mario?
No, I definitely approached that Mario A. Reyes. I approached it very suit and tie and conducted it like I was on a conference call at work.
Gotcha.
Versus, ayo, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And I also think that showing up like that when you're dealing with people that you've known from the sandbox kind of off-puts them because they feel like you're being condescending because they've never heard you speak in that manner before?
I think oftentimes we have to, specifically us, right, men who are consistently doing the work for a number of years, we have to remember that everyone's not in the same space when it comes to our emotional intelligence, right? So conversations that we have very matter-of-factly now in 2025, in 2018, 2017, we weren't having that, right? And so I tend now to offer grace when I'm talking to people, because they could still be the old version or the same version themselves, and I'm a new version of myself, right? So I think as we talk about forgiveness, and I think someone else said it often, it's not so much about them as more about us creating peace for ourselves, so we can move on without harboring these emotions and getting that sense of resentment. So, talking about you specifically, I don't know how that conversation ended. Just be mindful, all of us be mindful that everyone's not in the same plane when it comes to the work that we're doing on ourselves.
Yeah, still working through that. I got a question, actually, for everybody here. I keep hearing this word thrown around, but I don't understand necessarily its true definition. So maybe you could anchor that one. What does grace mean to you when you say, I'm going to give somebody grace?
That's good.
I would say grace is space to exist in whatever form that may be.
For sure.
So, allowing someone grace to express the truth of what they have to say or how they are or what they do, it comes with the caveat of understanding that it may be momentarily uncomfortable for you, but you're getting their truth, right? So it's kind of like my boy Sean said that one of his OGs gave him this kind of thought, like in an argument with your wife or a partner or whatever. It's like, do you want to be happy or do you want to be right? Right? And so for that, it's kind of like you need to give grace in order for the progression of things to occur. It might not be forgiveness time yet. It might not be a time for her to maybe express what the offense was yet. Or maybe it's not time for her to be accountable yet because she don't even know how she offended you. You know what I'm saying? So, it's kind of like there has to be a communication process. You know what I mean?
I think,
and grace starts it.
That's a good point.
Brother Glenn.
I think grace is unmerited favor, right? It's just...
Oh, that's a bar. I'm going to put that in a poem.
It's just you extend, like you said, space for that person to be, whether you like it or you don't like it, whatever that is. It's just, you want to give people the freedom to exist, and understanding that they are not God, like they're not perfect. You can't be perfect, you're human. So I think it's just unmerited favor. I'm just extending it. You might not even deserve it, but
yeah, I agree. I think for me, grace is time plus space. Right?
Time plus
I like that.
It's grace.
Wow.
Time plus space.
Does it equal anything?
Yeah,
It equals grace.
Time plus space equals grace. And I find that those of us who struggle to give others grace don't give ourselves grace.
Indeed.
We don't give ourselves time plus space.
Powerful.
When I think about, I don't know why, when you were talking, there was a forgiveness line that I have in a poem where I talk about my propensity for alcoholism. It's rampant in my family. I got, I think 8 uncles that are no longer with us due to some level of abuse of a drug. And it's more so than anything alcohol. And I say I'm a sucker for myself because I'm always so forgiving. And I feel like I think there's a difference between forgiving yourself for the offense and moving on in a healthy manner, I guess, versus forgiving yourself and just duplicating the effort that you did. So if I'm addicted to something and I have shame or guilt about my actions in that time, and then I continue to drink, is that forgiveness or is that just the addiction pulling you?
That's the weakness. That's the weakness of the flesh, right? So that's what I spoke to at the top of the segment. It was, our flesh is what it is. Like we have, and then we're programmed, right? I'm 47. I don't know how old you are, but we're talking about 40 plus years of doing things a certain way, of seeing the world from a certain lens. And so that doesn't go away just because you have an enlightenment on what you're doing, right? And how it may be detrimental. It doesn't change just because you have a revelation. You know, that feeling or that addiction or that struggle is still there. And that's a process. Like, you got to go through the process of really just eliminating that from your being.
That's the
it doesn't
practice.
happen, and it takes time.
Indeed.
And that's where you give yourself grace. Because you have to understand, man, that, you know, like, I slip up all the time, man. I ask God for forgiveness for things and then turn around and do the thing right away. And
Every time your hand's in the cookie jar.
it's like, man, you know, and then you have that shame, you have that guilt, but you got to give yourself grace. Yeah.
Jamel, you said something earlier about you have to practice forgiveness. I don't think anybody wants to be in a position in which they have to forgive so much that it's practiced.
But that's the beauty of it. That's actually the best part, right? Because forgiveness, as our brother Sincere says, I mean, you got to give first. That's what it means. And oftentimes we fail to do that. Like, you got to give grace first. You have to give acknowledgement first, right? Hence the prefix for. And so most of us just don't live by taking great care of ourselves in the spirit of forgiveness. We make excuses, right? We use religion. We use all the things that came up here as opposed to saying, I just forgive myself.
As
right?
an individual.
As an
Right.
individual. I'm
Absolutely.
waking up. I forgive myself. And it could be, today I did 10 push-ups. Next day I did 7. The third day I did 20, right? But I'm in this perpetual state of acknowledging grace and space for myself. And you practice that as a way of living, then anybody who comes in close proximity, they automatically grandfathered in.
I call it the mirror work, honestly. You know, are we being intentional with becoming better versions of ourselves? And if we're not, it's cool to just not do that, right? But if you're very intentional, I've been very intentional the past few years, between running Ndugu, between going to therapy, of like, I want to be a better person. And so for me, when I fall from, you know, when I have to forgive myself, I try to write it down as often as possible. And then when I'm about to act in that same way again, oftentimes I look back on that journal. I got a little pocket journal I keep inside of my car. And I look back on it, it's like, okay, Jamel, right now in this present moment, I know I'm feeling this way, but which road am I going to take today, right? And sometimes I take the right road, and other times I'm like, oh, fuck that notebook. I'm still going to do because of the flesh that Glenn spoke to. But for me, the thing that I love about myself now, I have a much greater sense of awareness, right? And so before, I wouldn't even take these steps. I'll just do it. Now I have those moments like, okay, Jamel, how are you feeling? I almost kind of cross-examine myself. And I see myself when I look back on my life, these past few years, I'm getting better at it, right? I'm becoming more intentional at it, until sometimes those thoughts now don't even exist. I just don't do it. But again, it's practice. You got to be mindful. We have to be mindful that I'm 46 years old. For the 40 years of that, I learned a certain way. Now the last few years, and that takes time. No one gets that overnight. And so to think that we're going to get it overnight, it's not fair to us. It's not fair to our human existence. And we have to, in those cases, offer ourselves a sense of grace and a sense of forgiveness.
I think Chris made a very good point about just communication in general. And even how, was it Mario or Wario that showed up to that conversation? Because it matters.
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
Who's Wario?
Oh, Wario, you've seen it before.
All right, noted. But from the communication perspective, I think, like, since majority of us are in our 40s here, collectively
We wish. We wish. Stop playing, man.
Yo, you seen that shade? He was like, he didn't even look that way. He was
I
like,
do.
the majority of
Well,
us.
I'm just being, you know,
You're
clear.
right. The majority. Right.
You know, there's a reason why you the OG. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? But that
I
means-
need that chair then.
Let me-
I'm the oldest. I need the front and center. How about that?
My bad. You can't have the tall cup neither. Nah, seriously. But I think communicating in this, just at this panel right now, this group of 5 brothers, I've gotten more as it pertains to the scenario I'm talking about to even consider a path to forgiveness and leeway, and understanding that it may still wrestle more with me than him versus any other dialogue that I've had with myself. Because I think what happens oftentimes is we get married to our opinion and feeling continually tell ourselves the same story over and over again, and now it's no longer feeling, it's fact.
To you. Right. It's
Which
fact
all
in
it
your
matters
world.
to,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And
yeah,
once
yeah.
it becomes fact to you, there's no room for grace because there's no room for anybody else outside of you and your ego.
You made up your mind.
Yeah.
And I think go ahead, Chris.
No, I was going to say, for me, to what you're talking about, being a father of a little girl now has kind of shifted my ability to just kind of communicate apologizing to my kids. You know what I'm saying? I felt like I wasn't actively understanding how important saying you're sorry was to your children.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Right? And so you can, raise hell. Yo, I need this to happen and don't nobody better do this. Or, hey, you left this out, didn't you? Maybe wifey left it out. You know what I'm saying? And now you done already gave a little punishment. You know what I'm saying? You done sent them to their room, or you done barked at them, and you were wrong. Now, you could let it be and continue the authoritarian iron fist. This is my house. Well, whatever. I was wrong, but she needed that anyway, probably for something I let her go. But she's also now developing her attachment style.
Yeah.
So now, if I'm raising her, or she's being raised in a home with a mother and a father where she's not seeing the ability to acknowledge and have accountability, well, then what type of woman am I raising?
And who's she gonna marry when she gets older, right?
Correct.
Absolutely.
If she can't recognize the need to be accountable at an early age, she's not going to model that behavior. And she's also not going to know how to communicate to a partner, whether that's, personal, romantic, or business-wise, the offense, what has offended her. And now she won't be in the habit of extending forgiveness or being forgiving. You know what I'm saying?
I think what you said just totally took me to a quote by Rumi where he says, "Raise your words, not your voice. Remember, it's the water that helps the grass grow, not the thunder."
Yeah, and it's a really, you learn great lessons from your children because children are wired for fairness, right? They're wired for fairness, right? And so when we get it wrong, right, that's the cleanup, the processing, the apologizing, right? And they're very forgiving. They'll show you watch children, they'll show you how forgiveness is. It's all right, Dad. Like, they're good. But when we go in, when we forget to clean it up with them, then it builds in this fairness, and they go fair. They can handle being reprimanded as long as it's fair, right? But when they get that fair, we start depositing that shame, right? We start depositing that shame from very early age. And then when they become 16, 17, we wonder why they're addicted to numbing themselves with a variety of substances. But it starts even earlier. The shame deposits start earlier for a lot of children.
And it creates a lack of trust too. You
Basis.
know, like, Daddy was wrong about this. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I said I didn't do it, but he didn't believe me.
Right.
And so now I'm not going to tell him what really happened at school.
Right.
When this new thing happens.
But also, not gonna believe that either.
But also build a pattern of not telling people when they wrong me because there's consequences to that.
Right.
So I can't even speak up for myself.
Right.
Have you seen
Damn,
any
that was
of
my
that
life
in your
right
relationship
there.
with your
That's
son?
deep.
Right.
I have two sons. I'll say my youngest son is teaching me more than my oldest son does. But yeah, I do. I see a lot of just issues. I'm absorbing all of this. Thank y'all, man. But yeah, it's a struggle. He's 10, so I'm dealing with a lot. Me and his mom and I, we're no longer together, and so I think that has affected him. And just, I haven't yet found the a way to have the conversation with him and ask him for forgiveness for the deterioration of the relationship. But I do see where it's impacting him. I think he longs for his dad to be and his mom to just be together. So
May I ask,
okay.
what are you learning about yourself in raising your 10-year-old son?
I'm learning that life is a journey like that. You know, you don't always have it all figured out, and that's okay. That it's okay to ask questions. It's okay to seek counsel. It's okay to go to therapy. It's okay to surround yourself with other brothers who may be dealing with similar issues or who have overcome some of the same stuff. I'm learning that I don't have to have it all together. You know, like I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to be. I mean, I just need to be honest, you know, and truthful with me, and hope that permeates all of my relationships, including with my kids.
I think there's something really, really specific for men that feel as if we have to ask our children for forgiveness for the deterioration of a relationship. I remember when I left when I got out of my first marriage, I really wrestled with that for a really long time. Like in my brain as a child, I thought I was going to be my parents and go and have a 50-year marriage. But that's not what was in the cards. And I think a lot of my parenting might have been instructed by that guilt in seeking forgiveness until I got to a point in which I realized that I am allowed to also have a perspective and know that I probably saved them from an unhealthy marriage and what that would have looked like versus healthy co-parenting.
Yeah.
Well, for me, I didn't save him from the toxicity of the relationship. So he went through year 1 through 6, 7, those formidable years, in a toxic environment. And so that's what I'm speaking to.
Oh,
You know what I will say, G, is like at 10 years, right? At 10 years, he's 10?
Yeah.
All right. So at 10 years old, your son has taught you grace,
Yeah.
right? Which
Yeah.
is amazing.
Yeah.
But I will say that don't beat yourself up based on your knowledge as an adult, because you don't know exactly how he's been affected. What I think might be helpful is to create a communication bridge of trust where he's able to emote and tell you exactly what he's feeling, to the point that you might be creating so much guilt for yourself that is currently unnecessary. It may not affect him the way you think based on all your maturity as an adult.
Proceed.
You know what I'm saying? And so give yourself more grace just to start communicating a little bit freely or more freely with him, to the point that you actually have real tangible proof of how he's affected and what might just be guilt or on your shoulders. You know
Chris,
what I'm saying?
let me ask you a question. Based off the question you just, or based off the statement you just said to Glenn, if there is a father that does not have that communication path to their child, now, my mindful you were talking to Glenn, but more general, how does a father develop that? Whether it's whether it's parenting a son or a daughter.
I would say it's habitual.
It's practice. Yeah.
It is practiced, and so I think in this modern age we have so many tools for communication through technology that has vastly improved. So think about if you was growing up in the 80s and 90s, if mom and pops were beefing and y'all weren't together, there was no FaceTime. You know what I'm saying? And so the ability to allow your child to see you physically, your mannerisms, right? You know, there have been times that I catch myself, I grew up with my stepfather in the house. And as much as I didn't really, get along with him or like how he governed the house, there's still times to this day that I'll catch myself eating and a certain mannerism of how I hold my spoon or how I chuckle at things. And I'm like, is just, you know what I'm saying? So your physical presence may not be so day to day, but if that communication can happen, if they can see you, it might be an iPad FaceTime situation habitually, whether that's daily or weekly. And I think that creates the communication, line. So I think that's a great place to start.
And as a shameless plug, I would say you've been privy to it. Manifest Destiny holds a workshop called Kingdom Son that brings fathers and sons together as a community. And we do team building exercises, touch on various topics, and have open discussion. And I think that healing together kind of as a community, and you're able to see the kind of perspectives that Glenn was able to give me, that Jamel was able to give me, that all you brothers were able to pour into me. You get to create bridges just from a step that somebody else took.
I love that. We definitely need to bring that back. One of the valuable things that I received from that program was being inside of a room and having another man ask a question that I thought about asking, right? But I might have been scared or nervous for whatever reason to ask my son, and have watch the dialogue between that father and son, and then be able to go inside the car driving home with William and be like, based off of their conversation, how do you feel about that, right? I think that's very, very powerful.
It's a sounding board.
Absolutely.
Pretty much. And that's kind of like what we all need. And that's really what we're doing, and almost the premise of this show. How many times is somebody going to watch this while driving with their wives or their children, and then turn around and say, well, based on what he said, how did you see that in yourself? I think that's important.
Absolutely.
All right, so we're on to the next segment of IGhtSoBloom, which is the brother with feelings, BWF. Now, we all get to vote on who the brother with feelings is. And I'll set it off. I'm gonna go with my brother G.
You know, that was the card I had. That's the card I had.
I think G was.
I don't have a G.
You should have.
by design.
But provided it doesn't, you don't have to shed a tear to be the brother with feelings. You don't got to be animated. But you definitely spoke on some heavy topics. Right. I want to thank you so much for not just your contribution, but being able to articulate your journey. That right there is kind of the premise of our friendship and our relationship. Me and his brother just met on the Humble one day and just started chopping it up at one of Chanel's old art shops. And then I was like, you cool, let me take you to lunch. And then we just started building more. And it was so natural just because, when you meet somebody that has like minds, you want to make sure that you're able to sharpen your sword.
Indeed.
So as now a BWF alumni, my brother, two things happen. The first thing is you get a cool ass sticker.
Let's go.
You could slap that right on to your cool ass tracksuit.
Badge of honor.
Put that over your heart. Put that over your heart, because now you are officially a brother with feelings. Because you never want to be an antithesis of that. You know what I mean?
Antithesis.
Right.
Talk to him, Glenn.
Antithesis.
The opposite of?
You know what I meant to say. But now the floor is yours, my brother. Anything that we talked about pertaining to forgiveness, you have up to 2 minutes to just
pour out.
Yeah. The clock don't start until you start talking.
Glenn was like, I'm 25 seconds in.
Yeah, man. Run the clock. Let's run the clock.
Run the clock down.
Let's run the clock. I guess I would start with just forgiving my dad.
Take your time, brother.
Yeah.
For a long time, I resented my dad because I felt like he didn't save me.
That's good.
I felt like he knew what was going on in the crib, and he just didn't pull up and say, "Come on, I got you." And that affected me for a long, long time. We have a great relationship. I love my dad. Like, that's my guy. I'm a junior. One of the best people I've ever met, honestly. He's a good dude. But that was the I think the thing I struggle with him. And so, but I had to understand like his journey too, and that's where the grace came in for him. Like he's a first generation Costa Rican, right? Like he grew up in a third world country, and his dad was an abusive man to his mom, and he experienced that, and just coming to America, trying to figure it out. They went through all kinds of stuff, and so, he just didn't have a model himself, of what fatherhood was, and I didn't necessarily care about that, when I was dealing with what I was dealing with. But, I that was probably one of the hardest things as a man to deal with, just like, why didn't you see what was going on and pull up,
How were you guys able to rekindle your relationship?
Grace.
Yeah.
Grace. That's it, just grace. I think, outside of myself, I'm able to, critically analyze, most things. I'm able to take myself out of the scenario and look at it for what it is. And I think that's a blessing. That's one of my superpowers. And I'm able to see how this thing was able to even come to be. Right? So with that, I was able to say, okay, Pop, you messed up, and maybe you didn't. Maybe you didn't mess up, to Chris's point, everything happens the way it's supposed to. And who's to say? You ever saw the movie The Butterfly Effect?
Yes.
So
Just talked about that.
Who's to say, right, that if he would have pulled up, how things would have turned out for me, right? Like I'm sitting here amongst you brothers that I respect, that I that I'm learning from. I'm able to, affect and impact lives. I'm employing people throughout the city. I have great relationships. And so who's to say? Like I have friends that grew up in homes with both their parents. And,
They can't give the same testimony. Yeah. We like to romanticize based on what our wants were, our wishes, that it would have been a fairy tale ending. However, being able to ground yourself and see the forest for the trees, says a lot in that how we navigate life doesn't necessarily always have to be as myopic as our wishes and the point of view that we wish we had when you're able to share such great space.
Glenn, may I ask you, how did forgiving your father change you and how you felt towards that relationship?
I would say it allowed me to be more compassionate. It allowed me to have more compassion to other people who I believe have, wronged me. I was able to just give a little bit more grace, man. I think grace is probably going to be the, that operative word in this segment. I think, that's how it changed me for the most part.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
I think that grace has been a reoccurring topic or segment in all of our conversations, and I'm wondering how we could do a deeper dive on that, Dr. Kerr. Let's put our heads together and think about, maybe instead of IGhtSoBloom being the podcast, we could do a workshop on what does grace look like for men, and we could host that. I think that'd be something powerful, you know what I mean? And now you have to be a part of it.
Let's do it.
You know what I'm saying?
Appreciate y'all.
Now for sure. So now we're going to end Brother with Feelings. Let's give it up for G one time.
Y'all put me on the spot, man. That wasn't.
We're gonna fight, bro. It's all good, but it needed to be said, and sometimes you need to. I felt a lot better. We spoke about certain things that happened, with our younger self, and I, like you, had to be able to forgive my stepdad. You know what I'm saying? But it wasn't until I learned about his childhood from his sister right? So here I was this whole time thinking, he ain't like me. But he was going through something, and what he experienced as a kid informed his behavior as an adult. You know what I'm saying? So thank God you were able to get to that point with your dad, because now you were able to, kind of save your relationship with your son because you know better. You know what I'm saying? And so now you can start earlier.
Yeah, it's good.
That's a beautiful thing. As we wrap up every show, if you know, you know, we are going to, what you try and kick knowledge?
Yeah, man.
With premier OG, Dr. Curtis Jasper.
Man, it's been another heaviness. I want to thank you all, brothers, my co-hosts and special guest Glenn, man. You laid a lot out today, and I know we're all grateful. I'm grateful for it, man.
Yes, sir.
Your self-awareness is very, very prevalent. Your peace and calmness, I could tell you've done a hell of a lot of work on your healing journey. So thank you for sharing the space with us.
Thank you, Pastor.
One of the things I'd like to close with in direct connection with grace is I often hear men talk about how hard they are on themselves, right? Mm-hmm. And that's like 98%. Even the men who we judge are not doing enough work, they still on some level internally are hard on themselves, right? And so I find that to be in place of not doing the healing work in terms of reconciling with our dads. Right? There's a way to free oneself as men when you reconcile with your father, right? The healing of that father wound, right? That's the forgiveness. And most of that has to do with self-forgiveness, right? And I did the work, similar to your brothers. At 40, my first book, I penned an open letter to my dad because 6 months before he passed, he gave me some insight that changed my whole trajectory and my look on him. What I realized is I locked him into a narrative, right, as the protagonist and the antagonist back in 1979 when I lived with him for a very short period of time. I was 8 years old, and I expected him to govern his behavior based on that, right? But what I didn't realize is because he was my father, I thought I had his entire life, right? As parents, we know now that the world has only positioned, like our kids, like they hijack our whole life as if we're not human, like just their dads. And when we get to experience the humanities of our fathers, we're like, oh shit, I missed it. My bad, bro. I was a jerk. Like I expected you to pull up. He had a whole life, right? My parents was divorced. That was their shit, right? And I had my issues in it. And it wasn't until I got his background as a man to man, who happened to be my dad, is when I was able to not just give him grace, but give myself grace. Because he tied up a lot of my emotional bandwidth that causes problems in other areas of my life. So my point is, I want to leave with brothers catching themselves to be saying things like, I'm becoming better. Because becoming better suggests that you're worse, right? It's a tinge of like, right? Now, effective, safer, healthier, more aware, right? But better suggests that we're here. Or I'm not perfect. You are in your own way. That's why you're here. And your difference makes a difference. Yeah. And so what I offer men is change your vocabulary. Right? You're perfect just like you are. Do you have work and refinement? We all do, but you're perfectly perfect. Your difference is the difference maker. Becoming better suggests that at some level you are worse, and you're not. We all tuning up. We all getting healthier and safer and secure and more aware-wise. And the reason why I say this is because part of giving grace to oneself is changing the way you dialogue with yourself. Change that. Start with that. Like, be your own best dude. Like, come on, bro. Just be like, come on, man. We're not doing that no more. So when it comes to the flesh, talk to the flesh. Don't use the flesh as an excuse. Be like, come on, bro. We're not eating that today.
That's good.
And if you do eat it today, I forgive you. We're not eating that tomorrow. Right?
That's good.
And keep it moving. So I end that, brothers. Love y'all.
That's good.
Love.
Yeah, that was good.
I'd like to thank you all for chiming in to IGhtSoBloom. This is obviously just another powerful episode, and we want to thank you and hope that you yourself are blooming. Peace.
Peace.